Welcome to this session, Working Parents, You Can Still Homeschool. My name is Jana Cook, and I am the Community Manager with Bookshark. I'm joined today with Paulette Vildberg, the owner of Acquire Marketing Company. We're going to be speaking to you parents who are possibly struggling with the schedule of working part-time or full-time while trying to homeschool your parents. Paulette, thank you so much for being here. Would you like to tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your experience in this working parent homeschooling arena?
Of course, and thank you, Jana, so much for having me. I really appreciate that. So my name is Paulette Vildberg, and I am a homeschool parent of two beautiful daughters, and we have been homeschooling for over 8 years, right, as of now, and still counting. I have also been self-employed for the last 10 years with Acquire Marketing. And we, of course, marketing as it is in the title. Also with that, we do a great deal of homeschool conferences and homeschool workshops that we work with many different homeschool parents and families. And in addition to that, on a volunteer basis, I lead a homeschool enrichment program where I get to work with so many great kids and families with enrichment type activities. And we are located in Wisconsin, and we also have 2 bunnies and a dog. So we're very busy.
That is a full household.
Yes.
And full schedule.
It is.
So one of the common themes that I've been hearing in the homeschool communities this year in particular, because a lot of parents have found themselves choosing to homeschool because the virtual learning just wasn't an option for them or their child. So they have decided to come into the homeschool arena, but they themselves are working full-time, particularly from home, and they are just kind of holding it together in this last 12 months, trying to make it all work for their family. And I'd like to speak particularly to them and kind of walk through some of the ideas of why this year was different. It wasn't a typical homeschool year for anybody, but also how being a homeschool parent and a working parent is viable for people who think maybe it isn't. So let's start with working and homeschooling.
Yes. And Jana, that is a great question. And I hear that a lot. And as you mentioned in this last year, because it certainly has been a very different year for everyone, and especially for parents that homeschool and in addition work. And one thing that I think is a mindset that we all come to homeschooling with is that we have to homeschool at the same schedule as, for example, a traditional school between 8:30 and 3 o'clock, and then we have to have our work time separate. And one key point is that homeschooling is very, very flexible, and certainly there are different requirements in different states. But with that, a lot of working parents, myself included, really enjoy the flexibility of homeschooling because you don't have to stick to that traditional schedule. But myself and other parents that I talk with a great deal, they may homeschool in the afternoon, or they may homeschool early in the morning and then take a break and do some work and then homeschool later at night, or they may homeschool on the weekends, or in our case, we actually extend our school year a bit through summer. So we homeschool starting in the month of September, and we homeschool through the month of July, mid-July. That allows us for the flexibility when things come up with our homeschool schedule during the fall and during the winter, but it still allows us to have some great time with homeschooling during the typical school year, but yet extend it out so we're not pushing so many things in during the week, Monday through Friday in the fall, and that seems to work very well for families. It's just really getting out of that mindset that, you know what, we have to make our schedule in this certain time frame through these certain months. And I was listening to one of the tracks that you had done earlier. And one key point, Jana, that you mentioned too, is that you can make that decision as the adult in when you stop your math work, for example, or when you stop your school for the day and then move on to other things. As long as you're covering the basics and covering what you need to cover with your child and they're getting what they need, you can certainly be very flexible with that schedule. And that's I think, just a mindset that we all, sort of need to overcome. And I too needed to overcome that. And the other thing is that this year was extraordinary in terms of all the things going on. And this was not your typical school year. And it does take, and I know a lot of veteran moms, homeschool moms would say this, it definitely takes at least a year and a half to kind of get into your groove and get into your schedule on what works. So if you're thinking of this as a example year, sample year, it's probably not the best year to do that. It's definitely, a year or two to kind of get into the flow of your school schedule and work schedule.
So when I started homeschooling, I had this idea that I had to wake my children up at a certain time. They had to be at the table. We had to have this rigid schedule. And then as I started working more, I realized that if I let my kids sleep in and did some of my work prior to them even getting up, I was able to fill in my work day a little bit more and then do the school and then maybe go back and do the work day again. And typically a school day for homeschool kids is so much shorter than a traditional schooling.
Yes.
So that also helps, because if you can do school within 4 hours, then you can, slot it in different places. We used to save reading till the evening. So that was a bedtime routine. So we didn't have to calculate that into our time during the day, which really helped. So just being flexible. I mean, it's kind of one of those things that you don't know what you don't know. And so when you start to learn, when you've done it, even like you're going on finishing your 8th year, I'm finishing my 5th year. There's still things that I'm learning that I didn't have to do it the way I was doing it.
Yes.
There was a better way. And that's part of that growth mindset that we keep, these buzzwords that we keep hearing about. But it's so important to remember that, because it doesn't have to look the way we think in our minds, or the way it looked for us even when we were going to school. But if that's all you know, then you don't understand or have the information that it can look totally different.
Absolutely. And that's such a key point, Jana. And when I think too about homeschooling my girls, the other thing that we do is, as you mentioned about reading and reading at a different time, we too would consider our time reading when we do bedtime stories throughout the years, or, even we incorporate it while we're doing exercise. So when I'm on the treadmill, they're reading to me while we're exercising, or I'm reading to them. We just kind of add it to, to be creative and to mix it up a little bit. And that helps my schedule, but more importantly, it helps my girls with the creativity and not getting bored sitting at a desk, for 5 hours, just doing straight schoolwork. It's kind of fun to mix it up for the kids as well.
And I preach audiobooks all the time. I say they are your best friend. They've been my best friend, especially doing a curriculum like Bookshark that is literature based. They have been my best friend as a homeschool parent, because if I know I have a meeting and there's something I need to do, I can schedule that audiobook to run for my youngest. My oldest, they don't need that so much anymore, but my youngest, she can go ahead and color or play Legos while she's listening to the audiobook and I'm doing my meeting. And now we're both getting our work done independently of each other. And that's just another way to think outside of the box, that it can be done if you know where to look and what resources to use to make that happen for you.
Absolutely. That a great point. And it's all about the learning. And, back to our point, it just takes a little bit of time to figure those things out. Gather resources from other parents and how maybe they do it and how they work it out, and just finding those little tips. And I will tell you, it has made my life so much easier and so much enjoyable. It was, when we first started, it was a little bit more difficult because I didn't have that idea of, what we could do these things differently, or we could, do reading at night, or do reading, while we're exercising, or all these things. And I will tell you, my girls have learned so much more. It's more of a relaxing environment versus just ensuring that worksheets are done or reading is done at a certain time. And honestly, they're doing great with their schoolwork. So it's working. And I hear that time and time again with other parents as well.
So I've even gone a step further and taken my 4-day school week and compiled it into 3 days. And that has
Great.
worked really well for my family. And
Hmm.
then those 3 days we can schedule however we need to. But then I have other days that I can schedule for working. And I know that, it's like almost like a Saturday on a Monday, right? Like
Yes.
watch the cartoons, lay around in your pajamas, maybe get some chores done. I know
Hmm.
that humans are such creatures of habit. So we
Hmm.
think, no, Saturday is for chores or Sunday. And that's when we do the cleaning or that's when we do our errands. And it's just, we live in a 24/7 world now
Yes.
that we can go grocery shopping at midnight if we need to. Not that that's my favorite thing to do, or pick up our groceries. So that's one thing off of
Hmm.
our to-do list as parents
Hmm.
that, we have this, you're working, you're homeschooling, you're also
Hmm.
still a parent that's running a household. I mean, that's
Hmm.
a lot of different hats to wear. Um, but if you can just be creative, it's definitely doable for parents who do have the flexibility. Now there are parents who don't have that same flexibility, right? You're talking about being self-employed,
Yes.
and
Hmm.
I'm a part-time worker, and
Hmm.
so there's a little bit more flexibility in there. I will say one of the benefits, although I hate to say that a pandemic has benefits, but it has opened up some more flexibility for even
Hmm.
traditional 9 to 5 workers. So
Hmm.
that's been a really nice addition to relieve some of the stress for the parents who have found themselves homeschooling and working from home. And just trying to still get dinner on the table. And
Yes.
is the laundry even done? Are the dishes? I mean, I don't even know sometimes. Did the bathrooms get cleaned in this month? I'm not sure, but we've all been fed and we're
Right.
surviving.
That's right. And you know what? That's another key point. And I will just say, in all honesty, there are days, to your point about are things done, are they not done? There are days that are not easy. I mean, let's be honest, it's not easy. And there are some days that are very, very challenging. And I don't want to sit here and say, oh, it's just great and everybody should do it. And because it's certainly not for everyone, but you know what? It does work. And even, you had mentioned about parents that, maybe aren't self-employed, but are working for another organization. And I talked to a number of parents about this very same thing. And I said, my goodness, that must be harder for you to drive in, have 35 minutes of drive time, work, 7 or 8 hours, and then come back and then homeschool your kids. That must be, gosh, how do you even do that? It's different for me because I'm self-employed and have more flexibility. And he said, you know what, Paulette, you're actually not right on that. There is a positive to doing that because they basically shut their time off. They are there to work. They get a little free time to drive to work, and they, don't have, the dishes to do in the sink or the vacuuming to do or the children to follow up on until they're obviously available for emergencies or something that comes up. But other than that, that's their time at work and they kind of shut it off. And then when they come back home, they're available 100% for their children and the schooling, and not having the other interruptions of work. So it definitely works both ways. And again, it's not 100% easy. There are challenges that come up, but it is very rewarding. And I know that a number of parents, throughout the pandemic, they've had different work situations or, it's a different economy where maybe one parent worked in the past and now two parents have to work. So we have parents struggling with, well, how can I continue homeschooling when I'm going to work? Or we have a lot of single parents that are now considering homeschooling, but they feel like they have to make that decision. It's either work or homeschooling. And I will say there are many parents in all of those situations where it does work. It does take some trial and error. It does take some creativity, but it definitely works.
Well, you did mention that this year has not been a typical homeschool year. So back to this idea that it takes a while to kind of get into homeschooling. Personally, how long did it feel like for you that you kind of got into a groove if you do feel like you have one?
Yes. So, and that's a great question. And I would say it definitely took a good year or two to feel like I was in the groove of homeschooling and working. And I will say also, even with that, as your children grow and as they're working on new schoolwork and maybe things change in your job also, you definitely tweak it along the way. But I feel like it did take a good year and a half to kind of get into that groove. The first year, I will say it took a lot of trial and error just to figure things out. And also, Jana, not to get stressed out when, you know what, there's not that third worksheet done. You know what, yes, that can wait till Friday or it can wait till the weekend, but just ensuring that you're there for your children and you're giving them what they need, and then feeling comfortable with your work schedule and knowing that you can do a job well done there as well.
So I'm finishing up my 5th year and I still get nervous, even when you said that third worksheet not being done. Like I want to logically say, or don't do it at all, right? We don't have to
Mm-hmm.
push these ideas of check every box and get everything done
Yes.
because we're learning all day long, every day with our children.
Yes.
But for those closet type A personalities who really want to be flighty and just live in the moment. It is, again, we keep saying this, but there's permission. There's permission to
Mm-hmm.
know that it doesn't all have to be done. You get to decide what works for you. And if something's
Mm-hmm.
not working, I mean, newsflash, stop doing it. Like, and that I think sometimes people will take that and say, oh, homeschoolers are, maybe not as consistent in their education, or, their parents can just say they can stop doing it. Well, but we have that freedom and
Mm-hmm.
individualization with our children. So if my daughter comes to me and says, I already know this, and I'm like, well, great, tell me what you know, and she
Mm-hmm.
can teach it back to me, well, then why do I have to make her do the worksheet or make her do the
Right.
assignment if she already has a great understanding of what it's being asked of her? And that's outside of the box thinking. I mean, that's
Yes.
not how traditional school is done. You can't go up to your teacher and go, I already know this. So I think you should just give me an A on the assignment and move on and give me something else. It's just not possible typically. I'm sure there are some schools that have figured out how to be creative that way, but
Sure.
it's just ways of thinking that it's not going to look the same way that you're used to. And that, again, we're humans. We like routine. We
Mm-hmm.
crave that. And so
Yes.
it does take a while to become comfortable with the non-traditional ideas. And so when I'm advising parents, when they're calling into Bookshark, I love to say that you need to understand you are now on a foreign island. We're going to be speaking a different language,
Yes.
maybe just different vernacular, but like this is totally different. And I need you to be willing to hear and understand that it's not just taking a school at home, a traditional school, and bringing it home. And so
Yes.
I think we can't say it enough that that is the
Mm-hmm.
case when we're homeschooling our kids.
I completely agree. And that I think is the biggest key to developing that schedule, if you will, when you work in homeschool, because that's the biggest mindset that we have and that we need to kind of move on from in order to, have this great opportunity to spend with our children and, educate them. But not only that, as you mentioned, learn with them and also and work and feel like you're doing you never feel 100% that you're doing a perfect job and everything, and that's not the point. We're all humans, and we make mistakes, and not everything's perfect, and we just have to go with that and learn and teach our children. And also, I can't stress enough, it is also nice for your children to learn that, what, they see mom or dad also working or volunteering or whatever it may be for their work. And the children see that, to see the responsibility, that you're taking, and that the commitments that you're making, and all the great things that they learn from that. Whereas, and again, I'm sure some schools do have it figured out, but a lot of times when children are in school, they don't get to see that and see, what goes into working on a daily basis or those types of things. So I think that's key. It's, not only helping you as a parent, but also helping your children learn about how that looks and, how it works when, with the work schedule, and that, you can do a couple different things and still be happy with it.
and be stressed.
Yes,
There are
true.
there are moments, and it's important that our kids learn how to deal with stress through
Yes.
observation of what we're doing with our stress.
Hmm.
Just for an example, yesterday I ran into a technical problem, which I tend to do very often. I'm not sure how to get past that, but it was incredibly stressful because it was time sensitive and I needed to get through it. And my daughter just kind of looked at me and she was like, "Why are you mad at me?" And I was like, "Oh, no, no, no. I'm not mad at you.
Hmm.
I'm feeling stress from what my goals are that I need to accomplish today. And I'm trying to work through that. And unfortunately, you're standing here and seeing you're seeing me, but maybe it's not unfortunate. Maybe it's good for
Hmm.
them to go, okay, there's time. I feel stressed as a kid. What do I do with it? It never goes away as an adult. We always are going to have to
Hmm.
deal with stress. So how do we deal with it? And showing them in a responsible way, this is how you deal with stress. This is how you deal with time management and expectations and answering to somebody that is responsible for what you're doing. And I mean, all of these things are actually just wonderful opportunities to share with our children.
Absolutely. And that is such a great point. And, even my girls, and again, due to the fact that I'm self-employed, they're around a lot when I'm doing business or work related things. But even in talking on the phone to people or clients, when they're taking their breaks for schoolwork and I might hop on a call, they hear me discussing something with a client, they hear the communication skills. And they also hear when things maybe are going great and not so great and handling those situations. Whereas my daughters are now, when we go out someplace and we're in a store and they'll say, "Oh, I'm not sure that was the best service that I heard because someone was maybe not handling it professionally or something." But just little key things that, kids, I think, should be kids, but it's also nice for them to know these things. So when they get older, maybe they're not normally taught these things in a classroom.
I don't remember being taught those things in a classroom.
Right.
So I think it's great. The other thought behind that is, people tend to say that homeschool kids aren't socialized, but if they have a parent who is working from home, and you said that, like, they're seeing those interactions, how
Hmm.
to interpersonal skills.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I feel like in education in our country, we've fallen into this idea of that's not integrated, right? You get up,
Hmm.
you go to school, that's your job, and I do my job. And then we come home and both of our jobs are done. And we're living like these parallel separate lives. Well, when we're homeschooling, we're enmeshed. And sometimes that's great. And sometimes that can be a little bit too much. But at the same time, the learning never stops, right? Because just because the book got closed, the worksheet's done. But then they're seeing their working parent dealing with a problem, troubleshooting or
Yes.
learning a new skill, and it doesn't necessarily come easily. Like, that's I'm a testament to that, but the perseverance to keep pushing through. And I think when parents are working outside the home, their kids don't get to necessarily see the
Yes.
problem solving skills that are necessary in adult life.
Absolutely. And, talking about that, the learning is not done when the book is closed. That is so important. And again, every business or job is different and every family is different. But even from early on, Jana, I used to have my girls come with me on work type errands, business type errands, whether it was to the post office or buying supplies or mailing things. And they just got accustomed to, or making deposits at the bank or whatever it may be. And I thought to myself, my goodness, this is such a great experience for them because this does not come from a book. These are real life examples that my children get to learn, how banking works or how the post office works or all these other great things in how, the economy works or business works or those things. They're learning such great skills beyond the books.
It's a beautiful way to integrate that.
Yes.
If you can manage being with your kids that much. And again,
Well, we all do need a break sometimes too. And realistically, let's be honest. I mean, we love our children and we want to be with our children at all times. And even when I'm running errands without my children, I'm like, where are my children? You know, I'm not used to not having my children with me. But at the same time, we all need breaks too. And so you had mentioned socializing, the children. We are very fortunate, and as I know many parents are fortunate with co-ops or a homeschool enrichment program. To me, that is so key for the development of our children, but also it gives parents a time to maybe catch up on work while their children are in a co-op or homeschool enrichment group or gymnastics or music or sports. The children are able to socialize with other children, other homeschool children, or sometimes with other children in public or private schools. And they get that time to socialize, also exposure from other adults. And then we too, as parents, get a little bit of time on our own because we all need that, quite honestly, especially when we're homeschooling our children. And, sometimes you just need to, use that time to go grab a coffee or something else. But other times, I know of a lot of parents, and myself included, that we might use that time to catch up on some emails or do a little work for an hour or two while the children are also learning, having fun, and socializing with other children. So that's another great benefit for parents that homeschool and work as well.
I always envied the moms who dropped their kids off and then told me their plans for the day. And I was always like, I'm going to go to work now, but I'm going to live vicariously through you. But it absolutely, that's what made it work for us for all of these years, was that I did have that dedicated day when my kids were in co-op. Now, granted, it was not a typical year. Some co-ops didn't run at all. I know ours was hybrid, and then we did do some in person, but it was only every other week. So I think one of the things to be honest with parents about when you're trying to work and homeschool is that, like, you've got to be flexible.
Yes.
And to your point, this idea of planning, like how important is your plan each week when you know that you're going to be homeschooling and working however many hours you can do that?
And that's such a great question, Janet. And that is so key because, as you know, things don't always go as they are planned, certainly in anything, but especially, when you're working with these great little human beings every day and with their schooling and you're working, it is so key to plan. And with that, planning to be flexible, because sometimes we set our lesson plans and our work schedule and we do very well. And then all of a sudden the next day things just go awry and something doesn't work out that way. So it's definitely easier for yourself and for your children when things are planned and, kind of set in place. An example is when early on when my girls were a lot younger, I was working, but not as many hours and a little bit more flexibility with that. But I was working and I walked away from my laptop, and one of my daughters walked over to my laptop while I was gone upstairs and started typing all these things on the message box to a client. Well, unfortunately, one of my documents was in there that I was sending over, and, she apparently just was copying what I was doing, typing on the laptop. She saw me do that quite a bit. And thankfully, the client was very, very understanding. He said, "Oh, Paulette, are you okay?" When I saw the message, I'm thinking, of course I'm okay. What's going on here? And then I saw all these, characters and all these funny letters typed, but my document was gone. So thankfully, the client was very, very understanding, super nice, super flexible. But I did have to redo some of the documents that I sent over. Now, my girls were younger, and I probably do a better planning now because they're a little bit older, but because I had a plan in place, I could take an extra half hour to redo those documents. And I'm very glad my daughter has some very good business skills, so to speak, and was typing, but we did learn that probably that's not the best thing to do when I'm walking away from the laptop kind of thing. But those things happen, when you're working and homeschooling, there's a lot of crazy stuff that just comes up, even when you're homeschooling, just in general. It's best to set a plan of some sort, but also realizing that you want to be flexible, because you know what, Jana, stuff just comes up constantly with your children, or maybe a day someone doesn't feel well, or, something doesn't get done, or, whatever the case may be. It's just best to have a plan or some structure to work off of.
So one of the lifesavers in our house is, for me, meal planning. And it's just so practical. But when I have a meal plan in place for the week, I don't have this panic feeling that I start scrambling at 4:35 o'clock at night,
Mhm.
not knowing what I'm going to make for dinner. And it
Yes.
actually can extend my work day. I can work from 4 to 6 if I have a meal plan and it's either in the oven or one of my girls are going to start making dinner for me, because it's all planned out. That has been a lifesaver. And that 4 to 6 2 hour block, I'm amazed at how much work I can get done, because their work is done. They're
Yes.
doing whatever they want to do or helping me get the meal going. But just a very practical plan. And then there are weeks where maybe I didn't get to it and I feel it. It makes such
Mhm.
a difference. And everyone else feels it too. They're like, oh, mom's, stay out of mom's way. She still has her laptop out, but she's in the kitchen trying to figure out what we're going to eat for dinner. And again, those are the days where I'm like, make a peanut butter jelly for dinner, or we're making breakfast. But it does make, so I'm just amazed at how much of a difference that simple little plan for meals at the beginning of the week to have it out changes the dynamic of our late afternoon, early evening times.
I agree. And as you said, it's just a small part of the week, but it just helps. I mean, even from lesson planning, and I know there are people out there that are just not planners, and that's okay, because you don't need to be a full-fledged planner, but yet even just breaking a part of your week to say you're going to plan, part of your lesson on the schedule, maybe 2 or 3 subjects. And you know what? If things change, you can switch it up a little bit. Or, as you said, meal planning. A lot of moms are great at that, and it makes it so much easier. And it doesn't require a lot of time to do that, but it saves you so much time so that you can do some extra work for an hour or two, or spend some extra time with your children reading or playing a couple of good games or playing outside, or whatever that may be.
And always write your plan in pencil.
That is true.
That's a hard, fast homeschool rule.
Yes.
Everything in pencil, because I like to say I like an outline more
Mm-hmm.
than I like a detailed plan. So if I just know, okay, here's the gist of it, and if things get moved around or changed, I'm okay with that. But at least I have an idea of what is going to be attempted for the week.
Yes, I agree. And yes, pencil is definitely best, because it does change. But again, with homeschooling, there's so much flexibility, and that's such a key point, just so much flexibility. And you know what? You can make those changes on the fly, or as you go, for people that just aren't planning or into planning, definitely.
And baby steps, small,
Mm-hmm.
start
Mm-hmm.
small, smart,
Mm-hmm.
start with, just maybe one day a week, having one time where you do the same thing.
Yes.
I mean, it really can. And then once that gets comfortable, you can add some more in. But it's amazing that I think, again, it's our human nature. We think all or nothing. I'm not a
Mm-hmm.
planner, so I can't do anything. Or I'm a
Mm-hmm.
planner, so I have to plan every single minute of my day. But
Yes.
we can
Mm-hmm.
baby step into these small things without having to change our entire world. Because you and I both know, when you try to overhaul, things don't
Mm-hmm.
typically stick. And then it all falls
Right.
apart because you're trying to do too much change, and we just need a little bit, just like our kids. They just need a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of push, one thing at a time. And we need to give ourselves the same grace, because although we're adults, we're still human.
That is so true. And I think that is so important to keep in mind, Jana, because I feel like sometimes, and we definitely want to give our kids grace, and the children, not every day they're going to be, 100% apt on learning everything that we're talking about or doing the work. Everybody has an off day, but we also too have to allow ourselves to do that. And I think too, why that takes a good year to kind of get into the schedule, just for that reason. We're so much on to, we have to get this done, that done. And quite frankly, when I have so many things to do, and my checklist is 5 miles long, I honestly feel like, why do I even want to do this? Because there's so much. But when we break it off, as you said, in small parts, it feels definitely more achievable. And it feels great to make those accomplishments and do that. And I think it helps people drive them more to get the other things done. So thank you for that. That's a great point.
You bet. All right. So let's talk about some tools that maybe can help parents make this idea of planning a little bit easy. I mean, we said hard, fast rule number one, if you're going to write it down, it's got to be in pencil. But what are some of the other tools that you use in your homeschool and work life that have helped you stay on this schedule?
Yeah, and that's a great question because, and again, everyone has a different way of organizing and a way of planning. But one thing to recognize is there are so many great tools out there for homeschool parents. And there are many free things, even from, a Google Calendar, putting your lesson plans in the Google Calendar or in your work schedule, or some things that you need to get accomplished that day. There are also homeschool trackers where you can track your school hours. I know that some people, are just saying, well, I just don't know where to track my hours. I'm so busy. I've got this done, this to do, that to do. There are apps that you can use to track your homeschool hours. But also keeping in mind, there's a lot of free things out there that if, cost is an issue, as is in this economy, cost is always definitely an issue. There are great downloads that you can use to track hours. There are things on Pinterest that you can check out for spreadsheets that are already calculated, so it totals up your hours. The other day I was talking to a mom that is a working mom, and I was just asking her, and a homeschool mom, and I was asking her, what makes your life easier, because you work and you homeschool and you do all these fun things, field trips for your children, all these things. And her daughter, who is a ninth grader, high schooler, walks up to us and heard this conversation. She said, what makes it really easy for me is I just have it on a calendar. So my mom and I both know that these are the things that I need to work on each day. And my mom doesn't even have to check with me. I just know to pull those assignments up on our calendar each day. And then I check them off. And then later that night or the next day, her mom checks the assignments and checks them off. And I'm thinking, she is just brilliant. That is such a great idea, because it saves time for the parents, but it also gives that independence for someone of that age that, gets a little more independence on their work and their schedule and so on. But there's that just, listing the lesson plans or your work schedule. And again, those are free tools. There are also, when kids get a little bit bigger, I know a lot of families that have high school students, and they use project management software to track the progress of maybe projects that their children are working on. It basically gives you an automatic checklist on when things are done. And those two, there are some free tools out there, and there are also some tools out there that cost a little bit. But when you think about it, if you do spend it, it's definitely well worth it, because it's saving you so much time than all the Post-it notes on your desk, or, all the notes and on, handwritten on notepads. It does save you time that way.
So we started doing, I think I remember doing this in school. We had like a notebook that you had to write down your assignments. So on a great week, when Sunday night or Monday morning, when I wake up and the birds are chirping and I just feel like all the stars have aligned,
Yes.
I will fill out my youngest, her assignments for the week. And sometimes, honestly, it's just for the day, if that's all I have time for before I need to hop on a call for work. But then I've noticed now, she's 11. And again, this is her 5th year of homeschooling. If I don't get to it, she will pull out her Book Shark instructor guides, and she will write out her own assignments for the day.
Great.
And then she'll wake up and she'll start doing her thing, and I'm in the middle of my thing. And when I finally take a breath, I'm like, oh, wait, have you done any schoolwork yet? Do you know your assignments? She's like, I've already written them all down, Mom. Now, I've got to double check, because she's still 11 and, her brain's still developing. And then she says, oh, I forgot about that one. And it's usually the one she doesn't like to do. So that's ironic. But it's amazing how that idea. Okay. So if I'm planning, and I'm having a good week and I get it all done at one sitting, or if it's just one day, or if I don't even get to it, now she knows and she can do it herself. I mean, those are those little things that you're saying come with time, that it has taken years for us to get to that point. But once you do get there, it's almost like we want to say you have to put in the time to save the time. But if you
Yes.
put in the time, you're going to enjoy your time so much more.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
it's, it's hard. It's hard work. I don't want to say that maybe it's not hard. It's simple, but it's not easy.
Yes.
And so, like anything that we try to do new, it takes a while. And so for these homeschool parents who are just coming into it this year, and we started homeschooling without a pandemic, without isolation, without restrictions, without, all of these things. And so my heart goes out to these parents who this is their first year, their first experience. So we all know that the first year is hard enough, let alone a pandemic on top of it. And, like you said, financial stress and not knowing what your work schedule is going to be. And so we do just, again, want to say that you've done a great job this year. You've done the best you can with what you've had, and it has not been a loss. Your children have learned. And so, I had heard it said the other day, write down what went well. Write down what went well so that you can look at that and go, okay, what didn't go well. But if you are focused on what did go well, then you may be more apt to evaluate what you're going to do next year with a little more positivity than maybe without. So I think that's important.
That is so important, Jana, and that is so key. I mean, homeschooling in general is, it's to me, it's such the best of both worlds when we get to spend with our children and learn with them and grow with them. But as you said, throwing a pandemic in the last year, I mean, really, the kids have done a great job and the parents have done a great job. There's so many stressors out there, so many things that are challenging. And, with the economy, with, COVID and all these things, we've all done a great job. It's been such a trying year. And, as you mentioned earlier, the kids also learn about not giving up and, keep learning and keep working and keep doing all these things. And trust me, it does get easier and it does get better. And you just need to allow for yourself some time to get into that schedule and know that you're not alone. A lot of us do the same thing. And there's a lot of parents that would feel the very same way, but it does get easier.
I 100% agree. It does. With time, it gets different too, right? Like we evolve as people, our children are growing during this time too. So they're evolving as people. Hopefully we cross our fingers that it's all going to work out. But I think that's a parenting hope, regardless if you're homeschooling or just a parent in general. We get better when we work through things. And so just knowing that your next year is going to be better. And it may just be better because you know a little bit more, you're comfortable with your curriculum. It may be because you've learned how to be a little bit more flexible. It may be because your kids, you've seen how much they've grown in this last year being home. And so now they're excited to keep going. So each year it does get better. It's still challenging. You're still trying to navigate and herd cats at times. It feels like with children, but it definitely can get better with perseverance and good planning and thinking outside the box, and having good tools and being flexible and all these things that we're talking about, that, just to encourage parents that if you are on the fence about homeschooling again this next year, just know that you have resources to help you have your year get better.
Definitely. It's, I think too, there's so many resources out there that in the first year, parents probably, and especially with the pandemic, probably didn't have time to do a lot of the research. They were just kind of making that decision quickly. But there are so many resources, there are so many groups, there are so many families that you can talk to and that can tell you, honestly, yes, it's challenging, but you know what? It is so great for the kids, and the kids are having that focused learning time, whereas maybe they didn't get in the school environment and all these good things. So it does take time, and there's so many things out there, so many tools. It just takes a little bit, as you said, a little bit of time to research those things. But once you have them in place and once you've done it for a while, it does get easier and it does get better. And there's so many benefits to it.
And I think like any job, there's always a learning curve. So maybe we need to remind parents that this year has been your learning curve. And so that's to be expected. You've just taken on a brand new job of teaching your children at home. And it may not even just be your first year. We've been saying it could be 1, 2, 3, 5 years. It's all a learning curve. But it's definitely worth it. So I think sometimes we get into this mindset of if it didn't go well the first time, it can't be improved upon. And you and I are testaments to the fact that that just is not true.
Absolutely. That is not true. And, with anything too, it does take some time to see the rewards. And all of a sudden, when things are clicking with your children and, those light bulbs are going off and they're not going to enjoy every single thing about schoolwork. It is schoolwork, but there are going to be things that, the flexibility with homeschool gives them that they can learn about maybe some things they're interested in that they hadn't been able to learn about in school. And you get to see them develop those interests and take it, from just learning about it to a hobby or, just seeing that light bulb go on with your children. It's so rewarding.
Well, Paulette, as we near the end of our session today, do you have some encouraging words for parents just to kind of wrap it all up and say, I work, I do it, you can do it too. What do you have for our audience?
Great. So, Janet, that's a great question. So I would say this, again, it's not easy, but I will tell you, I work and I homeschool and I also volunteer, and my days can be very crazy, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. I think the homeschool experience is so important for my children. And I know in talking with other families, the same thing. It is very doable. It takes some trial and error. It takes some time, but it is definitely doable. And you can make it work. Again, as Jana said, it's not been a good example for this year, but it's definitely been a learning curve, and it will get better and it will get easier. It's definitely doable.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come on and just encourage our listeners to the fact that if they have found themselves homeschooling and working full time and on that fence of is this really sustainable? I think that you have just given them some great tips on how to keep going if that's what they are looking for next year. So thank you so much, Paulette.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for being here. We'll see you next time.